Barcelona has a little bit of a reputation for usually being one of the most boring races on the calendar, but this year I think it definitely delivered, and that is despite there being no safety cars, no yellow flags, and also all 20 cars finishing the race with no retirements. Still, the man that I think will leave the race more disappointed than anyone else is Lando Norris. One of the best things about Lando is that he is very honest and very self-critical when he feels the need to be, and in his own words when asked if McLaren had the fastest car, he said, "Today, yes. Yesterday, no. Yesterday, 100% the Red Bull was quicker. I don't care what people say. Today, we were the quickest car. Fact. So the team deserved it. I think we were the quickest on track. From start to finish, we were the quickest. With the overtaking, with the following, with the dirty air, that cost me the win today. So I just didn't do a good enough job. Simple as that." What made this weekend so exciting is that it really did seem like we had 4 teams at least in the mix to challenge for the win, and qualifying confirmed that McLaren was definitely Red Bull's closest challenger. Mercedes and Ferrari qualified 3/10 behind Lando and Max, which when you look at the race actually was their real deficit this weekend. What didn't help them is that both of their quickest drivers this weekend, Lewis and Charles, actually fell behind their teammates at the start of the race and lost quite a bit of time in the opening stints. In the end, Lewis finished 17 seconds and Charles 22 seconds behind Max, and even though Lewis himself said in the post-race interview that the gap would have been much closer had it not been for his bad start, when you extrapolate the 2 to 3/10 qualifying margin per lap over 66 laps, that basically gets you to over 12 seconds, meaning that the gap that we saw in qualifying basically turned out to be their true deficit, even if they had their fastest drivers out front extracting the maximum amount of performance with the perfect strategy. McLaren, on the other hand, definitely did have the pace to not just challenge, but beat Red Bull. This weekend was all about tyres, as we saw not only in Formula 1, but also in Formula 2, Formula 3, and F1 Academy, all of whom struggled with tyre management. As Max echoed after the race, the McLaren was easiest on its tyres, and they could also push for harder and longer, which we saw specifically during the final stint, where after pitting with 18 laps to go, Lando was 8 seconds behind Max and managed to claw back that deficit to just 2.2 seconds at the end of the race. Given how close in performance Max and Lando were, the race was essentially lost before they even got into turn 1. Lando's initial getaway from pole actually wasn't too bad, but it was that second phase where he got a huge amount of wheel spin that allowed Max to force his way down the inside, and then allowed the fast-starting Russell to get a double slipstream and brake on the racing line to take the lead of the race. The only other opportunity Lando had to potentially win the race would have been if he was able to pass Russell very early on in the same way that Max did. This is because the soft tyre had a very narrow window where it was at its absolute best, and it's also why just 2 laps into the race, Max's race engineer GP told him that this was their best opportunity because he knew that urgency was key. Max also benefited from the fact that George had no one in front of him giving him any kind of slipstream, and credit to Max, it was the perfect execution with a fast and decisive move that ultimately took the win completely out of Lando's reach. By the time that Lando got to within DRS range just a few laps later and couldn't get the move done straight away, the soft tyres had lost their peak performance, Russell's dirty air started hurting Lando's tyres, and with Max only 2 or 3 seconds up the road, he also gave Russell a very slight slipstream that in combination meant that whilst Lando was definitely faster, he didn't have enough of a delta to get past him. In the end, that's it. Even though McLaren tried to do something different on the strategy, letting Lando go long on each stint to give him time in clean air and fresher tyres towards the end, this was a race that was lost primarily due to a bad start and also due to Lando not being able to overtake Russell early on. I still maintain that had Lando fallen behind just George Russell and managed to stay ahead of Max Verstappen, I think he would have won the race with his superior tyre wear. But this was a race where Max Verstappen made the difference. That's not to say that Red Bull also didn't play their part, because when you look at the combined pit stop times, Max received 1.9 and 2.4 second pit stops, whilst McLaren could only deliver 2.8 and 3.6 seconds respectively. This race represented a shift in both the pressure and expectations for Lando Norris and McLaren going forward. If you're quick around Barcelona, which is a track that really tests a car's overall performance across a range of different corners, then fundamentally you have to have a good car. If McLaren continue to be this competitive relative to Red Bull going forward, then the expectations have to be that they should at least start to win races on a semi-consecutive basis. That is also why I thought that it was really bizarre that Lando Norris still received the Driver of the Day award. Now, this is something that I'm not sure I've ever talked about on my channel because I understand that this award is just a little bit of fun, a way to get the fans involved, and ultimately that it is a popularity contest. But when you have the fastest car start on pole position and end up finishing in second through your own mistake, that doesn't make you Driver of the Day. Max Verstappen was the Driver of the Day. The reason I bring this up, however, is that to me, it shows that the general fan base still sees McLaren as this underdog, and that if they get even close to Max and Red Bull, that it means that they've done a really good job. But this is where the level of pressure and expectations now have to change. For the past 5 years, Lando Norris has wanted to be in this exact situation that drivers like Lewis and Max have been in, where every single weekend you go into a race knowing that you have a realistic chance of winning it. That brings with it a different level of pressure, and it's that type of pressure that McLaren as a team hasn't been under for a very long time. If you compare the past few races to 2021, which had an even bigger level of pressure each weekend because we had a championship fight, what made Lewis and Max so incredible that season, especially now looking back, is that somehow they were able to cope with an unimaginable level of pressure and constantly fight for the win. A second place in 2021 was a bad weekend. That is the level that Lewis and Max were operating at. Even if we don't have a championship fight in 2024, McLaren have done an incredible job to develop the car into a position where now we genuinely don't know going into every single weekend if Max is going to win the race or not. But now they also have to be judged every single weekend in the same way that we judge Red Bull if they want to beat them. Max and Red Bull over the past 3 or 4 years have set new standards in dominance, not just down to the greatness of Max that Lando has to match and beat on the track, but also new standards on an operational level with their pit stops and strategy. Even though Lando and McLaren lost out, this is still an amazing sign for the rest of the season, especially looking back at the first few races of 2024. The convergence of performance, which is down to the stable regulations, has introduced almost 4 teams at the front of the grid. And the more Lando gets used to consistently racing at the front and consistently having to perform with that level of expectations on his shoulders to challenge for the win, the more confident and more competitive he's going to become against Max Verstappen. I know this video might sound quite harsh on Lando and McLaren, but that's just because if you want to be considered amongst greatness and be a real championship contender, especially for 2025, you have to be judged to the same standard that I judge Max, and in the same way that I judged Lewis back when he was in a championship capable car. I have had Lando in my top 5 drivers of the season every year since 2021. That is how long I think he has truly been one of the best drivers on the grid. Even so far in 2024, he has done an incredible job, and in Spain, him and Max were in a class of their own. When you look at where Piastri was, and let's not even talk about Checo, it shows that Lando is driving at almost that championship level, but he is still not quite there yet. There is almost no room for any error at the front of the grid from either driver or team, and that is just down to the unbelievably high bar that has been set by Max Verstappen and Red Bull. Well, there you have it. If you did enjoy this video and want to support the channel, then don't forget to subscribe, that would be massively appreciated, and I'll see you in the next one.